Hey guys, welcome back to another video. And as we get closer to hunting season, it's time to go out, clear trails, get those tree stands ready, and I have a new tool to do that here. This Dewalt Pole Saw with a 4 amp hour battery. Now, what I'm really set out to question here is this tool good for this application? Is this more of a homeowner's tool, or are we finally at the precipice where we can start replacing gas pole saws and things of that nature with electric tools to work in the woods? I have a couple of days cutting with this thing under my belt already. I wanted to give it a little bit of a trial run before making this video. Now, a couple things to note with this pole saw. Whereas with normal pole saws, especially these gas 2-cycle ones like the one behind me, they're going to be back end heavy. So the front is going to feel real light. You're going to have to push down onto the limb. Not the case with this Dewalt, and this is a bit of a double-edged sword. The motor on this particular model is located on the front right next to the chain, so it actually makes it front end heavy. While this makes it a little more difficult to control as far as holding it up, and you definitely have to have pushing more force upwards with your brace arm. The benefit is whenever you are down a limb, you don't have to exert any additional force trying to pull down on it. That motor's heavy enough, it'll do that for you. Now, in terms of the battery, that is going to be a huge question. Runtime, I have personally not had any issues with it, but it's been about 100 degrees here with a heat index of 115 to 120. So I'm only cutting for an hour or two at a time, and I'm cutting stuff that's usually about a 1/2 inch thick, but I do run into some stuff occasionally where it's closer to 4 inch thick that I need to clear. Overall though, this 4 amp hour battery has performed phenomenally. I've only seen it go down to about 2 bars out of 3, and I have an additional battery if I need it, but that really hasn't been a concern. Probably the most aggravating thing about this particular pole saw thus far is, number one, I really don't care for this safety latch on the trigger. I understand why it's there, but it tends to get in the way. There's not a great way to really push it down single-handed. You kind of have to slide your hand across it and hope you're able to get that paddle right there, if that makes it easier to see. So you got to slide your hand in before you can actually get to your trigger. So I guess that's more of a safety. And the second thing is, this thing uses a lot of chain oil. Now, this is a manual, or I should say it's a manual oiler, meaning it's basically just got a hole in it. As the chain's running, it's just letting oil to come out. As I'm cutting limbs, I can see the oil flying off the bar. So it does oil excessively, but I'd rather have it oil excessively than I would not have it oil enough. Now, with that being said, the way to combat this is, one, you can get a more viscous bar chain oil, or you can actually take bar chain oil, put it into a cooler or something for a little bit of time and place it into here, and that'll reduce the viscosity as well. And I find that that reduces at least some of your oil leakage around this portion. But whenever you do store this thing, you do need to take all the bar chain oil out, or it's just going to leak eventually. Now, one last thing I will note that's very beneficial about this Dewalt is that it breaks down into 3 sections. So you have your handle with your battery, you have your pole saw, and then you have an extension piece. But this all fits relatively nice in the back of this ATV versus my other pole saw, which is clearly sticking out, and there's not really as nice of a way to break it down. I could do it, but it's a bit more of a pain. So kudos to Dewalt for making this relatively easy to store. Definitely, if you had an ATV with a basket on the back, this would likely fit in it, and you just have a pouch for your batteries and you're good to go. With that short synopsis done, we're going to go head to the woods and do a little bit of trimming. Unfortunately, mosquitoes are eating me up pretty bad, so I'm going to try to keep this somewhat quick. I want to start with this tree right here. I got good 5 or 6 branches need knocked down. Then I need to move over to this oak, and that's got a 4 or 5 inch limb. We're going to see if this thing can cut through it, but going to go ahead, get that safety off. Like I said, it's a bit annoying. Now that I've done that, just going to come up and start cutting. Give a little bit of speed. Did a pretty good job on that tree. Didn't take too long. Biggest thing with this electric saw is you got to give it a second to build up speed. Unfortunately, this has quick response time, although the same thing can be said about a pole saw. Where this thing differs from a pole saw is it is high in torque, of course, because the electric motor, and having 100% power at all times. So cuts through and you get all that power all the time, so it doesn't bog down quite as much as the gas one. That's a pretty good cut. That's at least 3.5 inches. It took a second, but did not do a bad job. Push that limb to the side. I got one more limb on this tree I'm going to cut. It's quite a bit larger. It's about 5 inches or so, and this is really the max I personally would do with a pole saw, although you may differ. But we're going to see if we can get that one now. That'll be quite impressive if we can. Coming through. I'm not applying much pressure. That motor is plenty of weight up there. I'm just going to hold that trigger down, make sure it doesn't get caught. And it is doing it. Wow. That's really all I can say about that. My gas saw, although it is only 25 or 30 cc, would have struggled with that, but this thing did an excellent job. Another thing I want to mention, while I would prefer a toolless tane tensioning system, I've probably done 50 or 60 cuts now, just settling a bit, and I haven't had to mess with this chain at all. It's gotten a little bit looser, but it's not bad. Really impressive to see that. That means it has a pretty good tensioning system, so not something I have to worry about, whereas a lot of saws, you're stopping every 15 cuts, it seems like, to retension everything. But just something I figured I'd note. Now, another thing I will show you that's really impressive. Well, I'll show you that in a second. Ooh. Now, if you're using a gas saw and you're alone like I am today, the way I basically do it is I take the ATV, drive it in the middle, and then I cut basically 25 yards forward, 25 yards back, and then I move up a little bit more. So I have to constantly stop and start the chainsaw, put it on the ground, pull it. Whereas this thing, of course, being battery, all I do is store it, battery back towards me, saw sitting out. It has a little neck on it that I keep against the bumper, and that keeps it relatively stationary, at least when I hold it while driving. And instead of having to constantly start and stop again, I can grab it, pull it out, plate my safety off, and I'm ready to go. So it saves a lot of time, and that's probably the biggest thing. Less time you have to deal with, starting and stopping. Obviously, the quicker you're going to be able to get through your property. Unfortunately, the mic setup I normally use, my Rode wireless Ghosts, are not working. I've had problems with them for a bit, and I'm going to try a different brand soon. But anywho, my chain is finally loose, and it's pretty easy to tighten these chains. I'm going to try to do it without using the manual. I'm pretty sure this is pretty similar to just about everyone out there. But your chain guard cover has this tool built in. So if you're wondering what that is the tool. It fits inside there. As mentioned earlier, I prefer a toolless system. It's one less thing to lose. Fortunately, it's pretty simple. You've got a flathead on one side, you got a hex key on the other. There's two hex keys on this side, so I'm going to loosen those up. and the only two on this side cover. You don't have to loosen them too much, just a little bit. One thing I don't like about the hex key inserts is if they get bar oil and sawdust in them, you're going to have to pick them clean, so that can be annoying out in the field. I should be able to move that chain up a little bit, and then I'm going to go to the flathead right here, and I'm simply just going to tighten that up some. Let's see, about right there. Alright, so that's pretty tight, so I'm actually going to loosen it a little bit now. Probably go about a quarter of a turn out, yep. What I'm looking for is I want to be able to pull down the chain and have it snap back in place. That's about the tension I prefer. Some people will have differing opinions on that, but that is what works well for me. Now I got it set there. I'm just going to take my hex key bolts, tighten them back up. Do not have to be just absolutely abused. Just a nice gentle tighten. Once you get snug, another, I don't know, small turn of this hex key, not much, and that's it. That is ready to go back to work. It's about 102 of 115 heat index currently, and while I can deal with the heat, I hate mosquitoes, so I'm going to be calling it quits for the day. I got 4 fields cut, lots of trail, probably about a mile, maybe even a little bit more, all on 2 batteries, and I still have a lot of battery left, as I'll show you in a second. But let's talk about this pole saw. This is a wonderful tool. Truly, compared to the gas one that I was using, this thing just blew it out of the water. Plenty of torque, lots of power. I was able to cut 6-inch branches with ease, even if it took a little bit of time, but it would have taken time with that gas power pole saw as well. And I didn't have to worry about gas, oil, anything of that. The biggest thing I love about this chainsaw is efficiency. I got more done with this tool than I would have with the gas power pole saw, just from cranking it and everything of that nature, and that doesn't have quite as long of a reach, and I don't have an extension for it. So if for no other reason why this thing was a success today, efficiency. I got more work done with this tool than I could have with the pole saw by myself, I will say, because I had to get in the ATV, drive forward and all that stuff, stop it. So absolutely fantastic. Construction on this thing has been wonderful. Haven't had any issues. At one point I did have the chain jump the bar, and I went inside, checked the sprocket. Sprocket looked in excellent shape with all the cutting I've done today, and what I wanted to also see if it was a serviceable part, and from what I can see, it is. So this brushless motor is supposed to last like 20,000 hours or something like that. I expect to be able to change this sprocket out and continue to use this tool for a long time, as long as I'm able to find the batteries, and I'm sure some third party will offer them for quite some time as well. But great construction, only a little bit of plastic on the head for that cover. 8 inches was plenty for me. Had a great job with this aluminum. Now, I did not use the extension. You probably noticed that. The reason for that is, one, I really just didn't need it for the cutting I was doing today, and two, with that extension, it's a lot of weight on the front with this motor, and it was just a bit too unwieldy for me. So for safety reasons, I just didn't bother with it. Plus, clearly if I had that extension on, it would stick way further out the back of the Pioneer and be much more difficult to take it from one place to the other. Just something to keep in mind. I'll use that when I'm cutting for tree stands and stuff of that nature, but otherwise I'm just going to stick with this 2-piece right here. Now, a couple things I want to note that could be improved upon. One, like I mentioned, the toolless system. When I had to take the entire cover off to get the chain back on the sprocket, I nearly lost these screws right there. There's 2 Allen wrench screws, so something to keep in mind. You got to keep a real close eye on that, because that's not very friendly for the woods. But I will give Dewalt credit for having texture on the screws, which make it a lot easier to grip. They're really thinking about the consumer in that regard. The other thing is, back here on the battery, I wish that they would orient this battery 180 degrees, because now in order to see the battery level, you have to flip it over, or you have to take it out, versus the battery indicator was up here, where the trigger would normally be, and everything of that nature. It'd be much easier to view and see. But yeah, those are probably the 2 biggest complaints I have. Otherwise, the shaft is held up well, everything's nice and tight still. In order to take this thing apart, you simply unscrew this right here. I might have to put it through my legs. This did not untighten the entire time. And those threads look good as far as the plastic threads go. There we go. Pull those apart. That's probably a 4-foot piece. fits really well in the back of that ATV, and I just have my handle, and that's it. Really easy to take apart and store for use in a later date, or if you're in a smaller vehicle. So there we go, that's about it. Check this battery out. I still have 2 bars. That is insane. This really does a wonderful job. Maybe a little bit difficult to see in the light. But guys, I do hope y'all enjoyed today's video and really like seeing this Dewalt saw. If you're interested, I will leave a link somewhere up here for you to go check it out for yourself. But that's going to be it. Hope y'all enjoyed today's video once again. If you did, please make sure to share, like, and subscribe for more. And as always, thanks for watching.